Welcome to New Testament Introduction, our guide to detailed analysis. Again, I am using Gorman's Elements of Biblical Exegesis as my guide for the discussion. I make reference to his book. You may wish to look at Gorman's guide to uh, Elements of Biblical Exegesis um, as a further reference to supplement what you've already studied in inductive Bible study. And remember to look at your notes and your books from inductive Bible study to supplement this short guide as well. The detailed analysis is the concluding element of your exegetical paper. Or your conclusion of the analysis of the text. It is what precedes your application. The detailed analysis is more than a summary. It involves balancing the big picture and concludes with a summary. It requires careful choice of which details to analyze. You won't be able to analyze every single element within your papers. However, what you want to do is you want to choose those elements that are obviously the most important parts of the passage. In detailed analysis, you move back and forth from details to the big picture. This is the point where you determine key words and phrases, and you analyze the phrases of the text to see how they relate to each other. This is this part of the paper where you identify your sources. Is there an Old Testament quote? Is Mark and Luke using, or is Matthew and Luke using Mark or the source we know as Q? Or what sources does Paul refer to? Is Paul referring to an Old Testament text? Is he referring to his experience with the church to which he is writing? How are sources, when they are employed, used? This is where you also address issues such as intertextuality, how texts echo other texts. In narrative, you focus on the narrative world. In epistolary literature, you focus on the rhetorical argument. What is the world constructed by the text? What form of rhetoric is the writer of the epistle trying to use or using? What are important words? How are words used? What are the repeated terms? What do the terms mean in context? A term can have several different meanings. For example, in the Gospel of John, the terms for love, agape and philos, are often used interchangeably. How do we know this? We know this because of the context. Also note that context determines the character of a word. Is the word literal? Is it figurative? The context will tell you. What are important phrases? What are the sequence of statements? Phrases make up a sentence. An independent clause does not require another clause to give it meaning. A subordinate clause, on the other hand, requires an independent clause to give it meaning. For example, this following simple sentence, the police car turned on its overhead lights and stopped me. The first phrase, the police car turned on its overhead lights, can stand on its own. It can simply be a reference to an observation of a police car, but the phrase, and stop me, requires the first phrase for it to have meaning. What are the relationships between the phrases? Gorman refers to chronological or narrative markers. These are words that are called prepositions that relate to the kind of action, before, during, after, etc. Gorman has a list of important chronological markers in his chapter on detailed analysis. What are the intertextual elements? Scripture, particularly in the New Testament, often allude to other scriptures or sources. What are these scriptures or sources? How are they used? The fancy term for this is redaction, from the Latin to edit. It means that the author has a particular meaning when writing the text. How is this particular meaning expressed? How has a particular author used a text? After looking at the text in detail, you bring the whole together. From your analysis of elements, what do you see? What do you conclude? You have looked at the specifics, now you try and look at the whole. What can you conclude by the author's use of specific words, phrases, and sentences? What has the author sought to say? The whole is more than the sum of the parts, but remember the sum of the parts help us also construct the whole of the argument. You cannot understand the whole without understanding the parts. Finally, especially in the study of the first three Gospels, if your paper is going to be on one of the Gospels, you're going to need to look at parallels. Does the author utilize tradition and put it in a different context? If in the same context, how does the text function? Does it function the same? Does it function differently? How is the author using the text? In epistolary literature, how does an Old Testament text, how is an Old Testament text used by a New Testament author? What point does the author make of the sacred scriptures? So compare the following in your, as we conclude our discussion. We've discussed Luke's description of the ministry of John the Baptist. Compare then Luke 3:7 and 17 with Matthew 3:7 to 12. What phrases are similar? What are different? Who is addressed in Luke? Who does John address in Matthew? What new elements are there in Luke? From the analysis of the word, phrases, and context, in comparison with Matthew, what is Luke trying to say? This is an exercise which will give you some practice in applying the detailed analysis. Finally, some final words. Upon completion of these three elements, the literary and historical contextual analysis, the formal analysis, and the detailed analysis, you are then ready to complete your paper. It is after these three elements that you will be able to draw your conclusion and make your application. Drawing the conclusion is synthesis. Application is reflection. Again, if you have an opportunity to use Gorman's book, use chapters 7 and 8 for more detail. Again, thank you for your time.